Hey guys, okay, so we now know that the attack that happened yesterday, killing 5 people and injuring many more, that happened on the anniversary of the Brussels bombing, was done by a jihadist, and ISIS, as usual, has taken responsibility for it. And I was following the whole thing yesterday on Twitter, and then I wake up this morning and there's been another attempted attack on Brussels. A man trying to run over people in the street that has just been foiled. And of course, we've had the usual statements come out from our politicians. Theresa May yesterday was saying she condemns this act of hate and evil and division. And then the hashtags have come out. Hashtag pray for London. Hashtag not all Muslims circulating online. Always, every time this happens. And I'm left here wondering, as we have another attempted terrorist attack today, how is this still happening? How are we still dealing with this problem? And not only that, not only how is this still happening, how have we gotten used to it? We here in the West are facing what I believe to be the biggest threat to our culture and way of life since the Cold War, and we're sitting here not even caring about it. And I know people will say, they always go on about the talking points with, what about the Crusades? Well, that doesn't justify anything that is happening now. Or they'll say, you're more likely to be hit by lightning than to be attacked by a terrorist, Lauren. But what they don't realize is that this terrorism that we're having happen right now is just a horrific symptom of something much, much bigger going on. And it seems like everyone except Westerners knows exactly what's going on right now. Erdogan, just a few days ago, announced quite publicly that there is a holy war coming to Europe. And while that may not take the dramatic movie-like form we imagine, the clash of civilizations with incompatible values is happening. And the riots in Sweden and Netherlands are a prime example of the beginning of that. And I'd say that with the 6 million migrants that German intelligence predict are waiting to come into Europe on the borders of Turkey and North African countries, they are only going to expedite everything and all of the issues we are dealing with at the moment as soon as the ice melts. And normally humans would feel some sense of urgency about a threat like this. I mean, back during the Cold War, our parents or grandparents thought that communists were hiding everywhere, just waiting for orders from Moscow. And of course, some agents had infiltrated the West, and the Cold War was absolutely a legitimate threat. But their presence was massively overestimated because people were afraid of losing their culture, their society, their way of life, to the extent where they didn't even trust their neighbors anymore for fear of them being a communist. So why is it that today, when Islamic preachers openly advocate for the destruction of Western civilization and support the murder of anyone who opposes them, that when people are marching in the streets asking for the beheading of Westerners, that when large numbers of Muslims in Europe are being open and honest about their extremism, why is it that today society we just stick our head in the sand and we loudly scream that everything is completely fine? And that in fact, it's the alt-right, they're the real terrorists with their memes. It's ridiculous. And I realize that it can be hard for people to imagine things in longer time spans. I mean, myself and many of the people who watch my videos are only a quarter into their life. So we all look at our society right now as it is in the moment and we say, that's not so bad. What is everyone getting so worked up about? And the thing is, when we sit down and we talk about history, we will glaze over entire millennia in less than a minute. We sum up events that took place over hundreds of years in a mere paragraph or sentence, like the fall of Rome. And the reason for that is because in retrospect, we can look at these situations and realize that all of these events that happened over the span of 100 years were leading up to this crucial point, the fall, the war, the creation of an empire. All of these points throughout it over hundreds of years led up to a crucial crux in the story. And while it may not be our natural inclination, I always try to think like that. I try to think the fact that our policies that we apply now or events that occur now have spiraling consequences of which the impact we may not know for 100 years from now. And I try to make predictions because I'd like to potentially prevent disastrous futures. And it's not hard to make well-educated guesses. And I can tell you right now that I don't think high birth rates in a rapidly growing immigrant community that suffers from rampant radicalization is a recipe for success. And when we ignore facts like that and ignore the potential effects that we could have hundreds of years from now, we aren't necessarily sacrificing our own lives or happiness. And that's why it is so easy for us to just say hashtag pray for London and move on with our lives. That is why it is so easy for us to say hashtag not all Muslims and then condemn those who claim we have a problem. Because we are not sacrificing our own lives. We will still get to go to the party tomorrow. We'll still have our Facebook and Snapchat and cute apartment and friends, and we'll be good. But it is the futures of our children and their children and other people's children that we are sacrificing. And historically, that was something that mattered to people, the future of their nation, the future of their people. But today, that sentiment is totally lost. Young adults growing up today would rather live a life of consumerist hedonism than start a family and preserve their Western culture and heritage. And they're free to do that. But because of this reality, the problems we are facing are so much bigger than just the already terrible problem of people genuinely wanting to destroy and transform Western culture into an Islamic one. Because we not only have to deal with that, we have to deal with a sickness within ourselves and our own culture. A suicidal nihilism and pathological altruism that is going to make it so that when future generations look back on today, they're going to be astonished that we missed the warning signs. And it's not only that we don't try to find a solution to preserve our culture, that being things like classical liberalism, our language, our history, free speech, democracy. But we willfully ignore that we have a problem at all and condemn people who try to point out that we do. We act as though terrorism is just a daily event now. And this isn't really the fault of the general population because this doctrine is being imposed on us from on high. Last year, Muslim Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, claimed that terrorism was simply part and parcel of living in a major city. And after the horrific Nice attack, the French Prime Minister came out and said that France is just going to have to live with terrorism. And of course, rich progressive celebrities and blue checkmark journalists on Twitter will back them up and go on about how there are so many more attacks in the Middle East that we ignore and that we're selfish for focusing on all our attention on one little stabbing or bombing or shooting in Europe. But they don't live in the growing Islamic enclaves in Europe, do they? They don't live in Luton. They don't live in Rotherham, where their children would be subjected to racial and religious abuse on a daily basis. No. They live in their gated communities, protected by private security guards, shielded against the truth of the outside world. And they have sacrificed their nations to multiculturalism, but they will be warm and safe throughout the entire process. There's an old saying that I think is extremely pertinent to what is going on right now, and that is that bad times create strong men. Strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times. And our politicians and leaders are those same weak men today who do not have the gall to speak out against the oncoming storm that is Islam. For fear of what? For fear of being called names. For fear of being called Islamophobe. You have teachers today telling their students that us not just totally opening the borders to all of these people that could potentially be terrorists, they're telling their students that's racist and Islamophobic. University lecturers are decrying the existence of borders in general as merely social constructs and therefore worthless. In fact, they're telling us that the West itself is something that they would like to decay along with the culture and people within it. Yet, the only reason that these progressives can say these ridiculous things is because their freedoms were hard fought for and won by those who came before them. And now, those values that others fought for, that created the good times, that many of us are still enjoying and experiencing now, are being sacrificed by a generation who refuses to fight, let alone even speak up in defense of their values today. I'm at a loss. I don't know what more I can say when we've already watched so many tragic events happen as a result of this. All I can hope for now is that in the bad times to come, they create strong men.